Hey everyone, your gaming Rev here. Welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to look at best starting races for new players creating their very first character on ESO, as well as existing players wanting to try out a new class without being sure of whether they'll favor a Magicka or stamina based playstyle. As a seasoned player myself with 9 maxed out characters, I know that the last thing you want is progressing a new character considerably, only to realize that you wish you had picked a different race. Something that will either cost you 3,000 crowns of hard-earned cash, or having to re-roll your character entirely. So keep watching to find out which races will give you the best performance irrespective of which class and path you choose as you level up in this massive world. And please, if you find this video helpful or useful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Anyway, without any further ado, let's take a look at this tiers list for the best starting races in ESO. Now, before we get on, a couple of disclaimers. Whereas at first some races were far better than others, ZOS made a good job recently at rebalancing them, reducing the effectiveness gap between them. This means that whichever race, class or playstyle you choose, you can make it work. If you want to roll a Wood Elf Necromancer Healer, or a Breton Sorcerer Tank, or an Orc Mage, or a High Elf Assassin, you can do it. However, some of these choices will be less effective than others because they will not play on the natural strengths of your race of choice. Whereas there are some races that are clearly superior for a certain role and play style, others perform really well with most classes and roles. These are the ones that you should consider if you want to make sure that you don't have to re-roll your character or spend money to race change. Let's begin then at character creation. Unfortunately, ZOS does not make a good job at telling you what each race excels at and to what extent you could play it differently. Also, unless you have purchased any race and any alliance bundle, you may be limited in your racial choice. For whatever reason, you may want to create an orc, but your mates are all playing in a different faction. It doesn't really matter in PvE, but it's certainly a barrier in PvP. Well, fear not, for there are great starting classes in each faction. Finally, and most importantly, ZOS doesn't tell you at the beginning that as you progress your character, you are going to have to make a choice between Magicka, stamina, and more rarely, health-based skills. Even though you could mix and match them, hybrid builds are just not effective in this game. If you want to create a character that performs, you will need to either play with Magicka skills, putting all your points in your Magicka pool, or with stamina skills, putting all your points in your stamina pool. The only exception will be running a tank, in which case you will put all your points into your health pool. Whereas you can reassign your stats and skill points for gold in your faction capital city, you can only race change by spending 3,000 crowns. So if you do not know which path your character will take, it is vital that you pick a race that you can develop effectively in either direction. Which leads us to our starting race tier list. In the S category, we are going to place the races that offer passives that enable you to effectively develop your character in either Magicka or stamina direction, while remaining at the top of their game, even at end game, both in PvE and PvP. In the A category, we're going to place those races that, while shining in one direction, either Magicka or stamina, also perform well in the other. In the B category, we're going to place those races that offer something to both Magicka and stamina pathways, but that are more restrictive in terms of which role you can play them effectively. In the C category, we're going to place those races whose passives are geared toward one more specific pathway, either Magicka or stamina. Whereas our primary focus will be damage dealing, we will also consider other roles like healing and tanking. So let's get started by looking at the Aldmeri Dominion faction races. Let's look at High Elves first, or Altmers. High Elves are a race that shine in the Magicka pathway. Highborn helps you level up faster your character and your destruction staff skill line, which is a must for every Magicka damage dealer. Spell Recharge restores either Magicka or Stamina based on whichever is lowest. Not only that, it grants 5% damage mitigation when you use an ability with a channel or cast time. If you follow my channel, you know that this is one of the reasons why I believe this race is the best one for any Magicka Templar build, as your main source of damage has a cast time, while your execute is a channeled ability. Then Sirabane's Boon increases your max Magicka by a whopping 2k, and Elemental Talent increases both your weapon and spell damage by 258. As such, High Elves are arguably one of the strongest Magicka-based races, if not the strongest. However, the fact that they provide Magicka and Stamina sustain as well as spell and weapon damage, it makes them effective as Stamina-based builds as well. A Stamina Templar would also continue to benefit from the spell recharge damage mitigation, and for this reason they belong to the A tier. Then we've got Wood Elves, or Bosmers. Even though the passive Hunter's Eye benefits both Magicka and Stamina pathways by providing movement speed as well as both physical and spell penetration, everything else is specifically geared toward a Stamina progression. You get faster leveling with your bow skill line, excellent Stamina sustain and max Stamina. So for this reason they belong to the C tier. Then we've got Khajiit. Irrespective of how you feel about cats, Khajiits are definitely one of the strongest races in ESO, if not the strongest one. Robustness and lunar blessings provide Magicka stamina and health sustain, as well as a boost to your Magicka stamina and health pools. Feline Ambush boosts both your crit damage and crit healing, irrespective of their type, be it Magicka or Stamina. Finally, the passives Cut Purse and Feline Ambush enable you to play stealthily, which is ideal for Dark Brotherhood and Thieves Guild questing. In other words, Khajiits are super strong both as Magicka and Stamina builds, both in PvE and in PvP. You can successfully run any class with this, but the one that synergizes the best with them is definitely Nightblade. Personally speaking, a Khajiiti Nightblade is arguably the best starting combination for any player. Not only will it be strong in any circumstance, but it will also make you thoroughly enjoy the Dark Brotherhood and Thieves Guild expansions, as a stealthy playstyle is hardwired in both their race and class. They certainly belong to the S tier. Now let's take a look at the Ebonheart Pact races. We start off with Nord. Now Nords on the surface are better suited for a Stamina pathway, as they level up two-handed skills faster and provide you with max Stamina. However, their increased resistances and ultimate generation are useful to both Magicka and Stamina pathways. But when it comes to rolls, that's where things begin to get a bit more restrictive. Whereas they would not perform very well as damage dealers or healers, they would shine as tanks with their greater health pool, resistances and ultimate generation. For this reason, I feel that they belong to the C tier, as they can be developed in either Stamina or Magicka direction, but would only perform well as tanks. A Nord Dragon Knight tank would make a great combination, for example. Then we've got Dark Elves, or Dunmers. Dark Elves, much like Khajiits, perform very well both in a Magicka and Stamina pathways, Both the Ashlander and Resist Flame passives grant you some really useful fire and lava damage mitigation, which is useful in both PvE and PvP, and also helps mitigate the drawbacks of vampirism. The dynamic passive grants both Magicka and stamina, and Ruination grants both weapon and spell damage in the same amount as with High Elves. Dark Elves perform excellently in both Magicka and stamina pathways, both in PvE and in PvP. And so for this reason, very much like Khajiit, they belong to the S tier together with them. Only recently I turned my Dark Elf from Magicka to Stamina Dragon Knight, and all I needed to do was to reassign its stat and skill points at their respective shrines and just change gear. So I managed to transition from Magicka to Stamina super easy, precisely because they perform so well in both pathways, just like Khajiits. Then, finally, for the Ebonheart Pact, we've got the Argonians. Argonians are another excellent option as a starting race. They grant a ton of max stats, increasing max health, max Magicka, and max stamina by 1k each, as well as a lot of sustain across your 3 stat pools whenever you drink a potion. Unlike Khajiits and Dark Elves though, they do not get any bonuses to spell and weapon damage. However, they do get a bonus to healing, making them great healers. Not only that, they work very well as tanks too, given their sustain through potions. They're also an excellent starting class when PvP is considered, particularly as Dragon Knights or Templars. When it comes to placing them on our tiers list, I feel they're definitely behind Khajiits and Dark Elves when it comes to damage, but they certainly belong to the S tier as they work very well both in the stamina pathway and the Magicka one. Let's now look at the races for our third and final faction, which is the Daggerfall Covenant. And we'll start with the Bretons. Now, Bretons are a race entirely geared for the Magicka pathway. They level up your light armor skills faster, they get 2k max Magicka, they get increased spell resistance, and considerable Magicka sustain through increased Magicka recovery and reduced cost for Magicka abilities. Whereas they're excellent for a Magicka pathway, especially if you're a beginner and haven't quite mastered how to sustain yet, they do not provide any significant benefits to a stamina pathway. If you're dead set on running a mage, irrespective of its class, they should definitely be at the top of your choice. If you are unsure and maybe wanted to change from a Magicka to a stamina pathway, then this race is most likely not for you. For this reason, they belong to the C tier. Then we've got Redguards. Now, Redguards, like Wood Elves, are a race entirely geared for the stamina pathway. They get 2k max stamina and some indirect stamina sustain through their martial training and adrenaline rush passives. However, unlike Wood Elves, they do not provide any buff to your damage. Among all of the ESO races, Redguards are the only ones that need a bit of love, to be honest with you. In any case, given their failure to provide any benefits for a Magicka pathway, they belong to the C tier, and I should say the bottom of the C tier. Then last but certainly not least, we've got Orcs or Orcimers. Orcs are another excellent race. On the surface, you might think that they would shine in a stamina pathway, and you would certainly be right. Their passives are packed with benefits for stamina-based combat. They get 1k max stamina, reduced sprint cost and increased sprint speed, and increased weapon damage. However, they also get 1k max health with attached self-heal, as well as spell damage bonus. Whereas High Elves make excellent mages but are also viable as warriors, Orcs make excellent warriors but they would also be viable as mages, especially in PvP. as movement speed is super important. The transition would not be as smooth as with a high elf, but it would be decent nonetheless. As such, they belong to the B tier, but at a little distance behind a high elves. But what about Imperials? Imperials are behind a paywall, and as such, most new players won't have access to them. However, we'll look at them in the odd chance that some of you bought the Imperial edition of the game. Imperials, all in all, they are a very, very good race, and you would expect that from a pay-to-play race. Alongside a little extra gold gain, it is the only race that provides that much stats. Imperials, in fact, enjoy 2k max stamina and 2k max health, both super important in PvP, whether you run a warrior or a mage. Alongside that, they enjoy a considerable cost reduction to all abilities, including stuff like blocking and roll dodging. Whereas the cost reduction would be useful to both Magicka and stamina pathways, the fact that Bretons grant better Magicka sustain makes Imperials a far better option for a stamina pathway. Alongside that, it should also be noted that their passives benefit more a PvP environment rather than a PvE one. As such, I feel that Imperials belong to the C tier. So, in conclusion, this is what our tiers list for starting races looks like. In the S tier, we have Khajiits in first place, then Dark Elves, and further down, Argonians. In the A tier, we have High Elves and Orcs. In the B tier, we have Nords, but predominantly because of their synergy with a tank playstyle. And in the C tier, we have Bretons, Wood Elves, Redguards, and finally Imperials. So here are some of my final recommendations. If you're a new player trying the game for the first time, or an existing player trying a new class, and as such you do not know if you will end up developing your toon down a Magicka or stamina pathway, I would highly recommend Khajiit, Dark Elves and Argonians, with Khajiit as your first option. Where PvE DPS is concerned, Khajiit and Dark Elves will be at the very top of their game, even at endgame. With regards to PvE healing and tanking, then Argonians and Nords will be at the top of these two playstyles respectively. If for whatever reason you are dead set on playing Magicka, I would advise running High Elf for greater damage but less sustain, or Breton for more sustain but less damage. If you're a new player and dead set on playing stamina, I would advise running Orc for great damage but less sustain, or Wood Elf for great sustain but less damage. If you don't care about maximized efficiency and just want to have fun, play whatever race, whatever class and whatever playstyle you want. Even though you may not perform as well as other combinations, you will have a great time playing, which is all that matters anyway. I hope that this little guide has helped you navigate the very beginning of character creation. My sincere hope is that it will start you off in the best way possible. If you have found it helpful, please don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and God bless you all. See you all out there. Bye bye.